Hi folks, my name is Ben Shapiro, and in this video I'm first going to teach you how to use a version of a visualization tool called the Interaction Geography Slicer, or IGS. And then I'm going to teach you how to download this version from a software platform called GitHub and run it using something called the Processing Programming Language. In the future, this tool will be most likely completely web-based, but the desktop version allows us to do some things you just can't do on the web. And another hope is that by learning how to download it, you'll learn a little bit about platforms like GitHub and a bit about programming languages that might serve you well for other work in the future. So I am running the IGS. This is the first screen you see. You see a little welcome screen. Feel free to read it. It has some information we might return to later and I'll walk through. If I click anywhere, I exit this screen, right? And the first thing I see is a digital, zoomable, panable map. Right? I can zoom out and in, pan, do all sorts of things. And of course, we're in New York City in the United States right now. There's all sorts of controls down here that I'm going to walk through. But the very first thing I'm going to do is import some data that we've collected with some folks we work with, some pre-service social studies teachers. If I click this plus path here, a screen will pop up. And it's a file finder. And all you have to do is somewhere on your computer, I'm going to go to my desktop and I put a bunch of movement files, tracks, in this folder, right? I have them labeled 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 7, right? And each one of these is a student's movement that we've collected together. So I'll click 0 and I'll hit open. And a few things, it might take a little bit to load depending on how much data you have. This data was collected in Nashville, Tennessee, so the map will pan to wherever whatever movement path you import into the tool. And if we zoom out and in, this is one student's movement, actually over a period of 1 week, right? So we can really zoom out. It looks like this student, traveled some pretty long distances from the center of Nashville as a city center, right? So let's import, let's say, a couple more students, right? So I'll go through the same thing. I'll import another path. We should see that path in just a moment. There's a second path. And how about we do one more path? We'll do 2, okay? And you can label these by student names and other types of things if you so choose, whatever's best. So we have imported 3 students. Let's also import a map layer, right? So the map layers that you can currently import into this are PNG or JPEG files. If I go back to my desktop, I have a folder titled Maps, and I've collected different base maps of Nashville, Tennessee. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to select, let's say, the racial dot map, right? So this is something that I created before running the tool. I'm going to hit open. And you'll see down here, if you look closely, there's now a map 0 included in there. So if you click map 0, you'll see the racial dot map that you imported, right? But you'll see it with a lot of transparency. Now you can adjust that transparency with this slider here, right? You can make it invisible, or you can make it really visible. Put it back over here. But what you want to do is find some transparency in the middle that allows you to basically see the digital map below and try to align something on the digital map, like a road, with the same feature on that image file, right? So right now, I'm looking at Highway 65. I get rid of the map, right? This is Highway 65 on the digital map. So what I'm trying to do is find Highway 65 on the racial dot map here. And I'm going to line up those roads as best I can, okay? And then I'm going to hit this button called Rectify. And what you've just done there is you've rectified a digital image, or an image file, onto a digital map, right? And that's a complicated process that a lot of GIS software supports, and this is trying to make it really, really quick and dirty and easy to do. So if you zoom out, right, you see that whole image rectified onto your digital map, right? Now, if you don't get it perfect, you can hit this adjust button, right? And you can kind of move things around and try to line it up perfectly, right? So, but when you get it right, pretty good, as long as your image file is at a proper scale that fits the digital map, the movement paths, for instance, from these 3 students, you can now study over both your digital map and, in this case, a racial dot map, right? And you can see these green dots on the map are predominantly African-American neighborhoods, and these blue dots are predominantly white neighborhoods in Nashville, Tennessee. The data was from the 2010 census, so certainly many issues that you could talk about with that data, but this allows you to look at yourself in relation to data about society in really, hopefully, interesting ways. That's kind of a set of things you can do in the IGS. I'm going to remove the map and show quite a few more now. Just like we have a map view, we also have different views, right? So I'm going to click this space-time view, right? I'm going to pan over here. So what happens here, let me just show maybe one path, right? So we have one student showing here. I'm going to kind of center them, okay? On the left, we still have that same students is moving over a map, but on the right, we now have a timeline, right? And this student collected their data, it looks like, from August 24th through August 31st, the complete week. And the timeline takes their movement on the map and extends it, of course, over time. And I'm going to kind of do a few things here. I can, of course, zoom and scale the time. So now I'm just selecting a small region of time, right? And the map adapts, the movement on the map adapts. Up and down on the timeline corresponds to up and down on the map. Now, if you press R and L on your keyboard, you can actually rotate the map, right? You can do some kind of fun things like that. But the real point here is that just as you can study your movement over space, over a map, you can also do it over time. And it's really challenging. It's really new. It's really different. You certainly can see how long you spend in certain areas very precisely. You can see how quickly you travel when you're on highways, other types of things. Your paths in time maybe look really different than others because your routines can be very, very different. You'll also notice some big gaps in your movement in time that were not visible in the map view, right? And that's when you weren't collecting data or your phone was having issues or you just turned off your phone, right? And so this makes kind of missing data really, really visible, right? I'll zoom back down here, right? If I show, maybe I'll show another path, right? Over about roughly the same period of time, right? And here's another student. So again, these comparisons can become really interesting. I'm now going to press the 3D cube view. And what you'll get now is something called a visualization called a space-time cube, where time now extends upwards, right, instead of across the timeline to the right of your screen. Same timeline, it's just now extending upwards into kind of a three-dimensional cube view, right? And when you hover over left to right across the timeline, you get this kind of cube slicing rectangle that you can use to kind of select and see where you are on your path, right? Powerful view, powerful to study different paths through this. Really makes you kind of think spatially in new ways. Just as we have a 3D cube view, you have a 4D cube. This sometimes is great, sometimes it's not so useful. The fourth dimension here is actually altitude. So now up and down is the distance you kind of travel vertically, or your altitude, right? And sometimes when you climb a mountain or something like that, it will show up as a really big vertical peak or a drop, right? Depending on what your altitude is. Some cities are pretty flat, so the altitude's pretty useless. But for cities where there's a lot of vertical incline and differences in height, this can be a pretty powerful view to compare and contrast your movement. So if we go back to the map, again, I have the 3 students select. I'm just going to show you a few other things you can do, right? If you hover over the information kind of button again, it'll show you a few key codes that you can do to do things like animating, grouping paths, and other types of things. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to press the key A on my keyboard, and this will animate students' movement paths over time, right? Now it's about 8 p.m., okay, so looks like, we're heading into the night, so there won't be a lot of movement most likely occurring by students. But as we're peeking through the morning, it's 2 a.m. here, okay? Looks like this one student most likely is sleeping, okay? That's what these long straight lines at 4 a.m. most likely would indicate. And we might see this one student head back from wherever he or she is staying onto campus and other areas of town. There this person goes. We may see other students if we have them selected. So one thing here is the ability to animate your paths provides you with different ways to kind of tell stories about your daily and weekly round and your personal geography. I'll stop the animation by pressing A again. Okay. One other thing I'll show you, if I select, say I had a lot of students here, right? If I press this plus button, you can create different groups, right? Let me see, I'll put path 3 and create another group. And what this allows you to do is kind of group similar or different paths and rapidly compare them, right? So you might find this really useful if you're doing this at the same time with a lot of other people. It becomes really powerful to group similar or different movement and compare it really fast and tell stories about it. So those are just a few other final things. There's a lot more you can do with the tool, but generally, it's trying to, you want to use and explore the tool and try to tell stories about your personal geography in daily and weekly round. And we hope you enjoy it and this is useful. So now I'm going to shift gears and teach you how to actually download this tool from a platform called GitHub and use something called the processing programming language to run it. Okay, so this is a web page available on the website where you can download and run the Interaction Geography Slicer. And if you scroll down a little bit, there's a couple steps that I'm going to walk you through here in terms of getting the IGS up and running. And so by doing these steps, one hope is also that you'll learn a little bit about kind of how to set up a software environment, download and install the library, and then run kind of a piece of software on your computer. So first things first, there's a little green button here. You want to go ahead and hit where it says clone or download. Go ahead and download the zip file. And you should see that file. Go ahead and download into your downloads folder, right? And so one thing I like to do is kind of leave. And what I've done here, if you see this folder here, I've dragged and dropped from here this downloads folder onto my desktop, right? So it's now there. If we double click that folder, you'll see a set of files that if we go back to the GitHub page, will match these files, right? So you've just downloaded kind of a set of folders and files from GitHub. Now the next step, you have to go ahead and visit a site called Processing. Processing is I'm going to go ahead and click it here, is a programming language and really a wonderful community that introduces programming primarily for visual artists and designers. It's much more than that. Fantastic to know about. But go ahead and walk through the steps on the Processing webpage to download the most recent version of Processing on your computer, whether you're a Mac or a Windows machine. And I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and do that on your own computer. Okay, so after you've downloaded Processing, the next few steps are fairly straightforward, but the next thing we have to do is actually put what's called a libraries folder into Processing. And this libraries folder is a digital mapping libraries folder. It helps show digital maps. So to do that, I'm going to hop over here, and after you've downloaded Processing, you should have a folder on your computer titled Processing. Typically in the Documents kind of folder on your computer, and in here I'm in Documents, and then there's a Processing folder. If I double-click that Processing folder, there's another folder called Libraries, and that is where we want to drag and drop our Mapping Library folder. And our Mapping Library folder is in the folder you downloaded from GitHub. So if you double click that, you can see a folder titled Unfolding, and all you have to do is drag and drop that into the Processing Library folder. You should see it there, and you're good to go. So now what you want to do is go ahead and run Processing. I'm just kind of clicking Processing to run it down here, and it should start up, and you should be greeted with a screen that looks something like this. What you want to do then, of course, is run the actual IGS software in Processing. And to do that, kind of double-click on that folder you downloaded from GitHub, double-click on the IGS reshape folder, and any one of these files here, just double-click it, and it will open up in Processing. And I can close that other Processing folder. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So now what you have is all the things you downloaded from GitHub are here. This is the IGS software. For those who know how to write a bit of software, or those who don't, you can kind of browse through this and understand a little bit about how it's designed and built. And of course, feel free to change anything and add things to this. So after you've done all that, all you need to do to run the IGS is press this little triangle up there. If I go ahead and press it, it'll boot up and start the software, and you should see this welcome screen. And from there, import your movement data and your base map layers, and hope enjoy exploring your data, hopefully with other people. So hope this demo video has been useful to you. Please reach out to us if you have any technical questions, and enjoy using the tool.